Donk Nation, Jackson, Janet's greetings and welcome to your daily dose of donkey with Ginger. It's your boy, the Viking Donkey, bringing you some nonsensical Steelers talk. There was zero prep work. Me and Gingy only said hello today, so who knows what we're going to talk about. Gingy, welcome back. Off season, great to have you once again.
Off season, lots
there is no
lots of draft talk going on right now. Lots of
fair.
jockeying at the top. Lots of jockeying at the top.
Yeah, for sure. Gingy, when the hell did the Steelers become the retirement center of the NFL? It's just an honest question. I mean, I don't think bringing in, and ironically, we talked about him a week or two ago, Cordero Patterson. I don't think bringing him in is necessarily a bad move with the NFL changing the way kickoffs are done. But man, he's a guy whose numbers went down a lot last year. His usage went down, so you'd expect production to go up, but it was actually his usage went down and his production per use went down. Not a great sign for a guy who's, 33, 34 years old, running back, wide receiver, kick returner. But, dude, just signing all these old people is concerning for me, Gingy.
Well, I think that you really mentioned, Donkey, what the catalyst is there. And that's going to be the way that this new kickoff works. That's going to change some things. Let's go over that, Donkey. You know exactly what's happening there?
Yeah, essentially they're going the XFL kickoff way, which means you're getting rid of the surprise onside kick, which, yeah, it's a loss a little bit, but not that big. The one team gets a setup zone at about the 40-yard line. The other team gets a setup zone at the 30-yard line. You get 5 yards either direction. 2 players are allowed inside the 20 to receive the kick. Those 2 players are the only ones allowed to move before the football is touched, and then everybody runs up and essentially it brings the kickoff back now because if you kick it into the end zone, it's a touchback to the 30. I said it at the start of the year that the NFL should adopt the XFL style thing. That's what they did. What this does is it lets the kickoff again become a part of football, but it really decreases those full speed sprint hits because these guys aren't sprinting 40 yards before they make contact with each other. They're making contact right off the start. It's a lot safer way to do a kickoff, and I am, for one, extremely glad the NFL has decided to bring it in. But my big question for the Steelers here is paying Cordell Patterson a 2-year, $6 million contract. That's not a lot of money. His usage went down. Does he work with this new style of kickoff? Because it's a lot different than the old style where he was running up against guys who had just done a 40, 50-yard sprint. So those guys are completely tired. You can see if someone falls out of their zone a lot easier because there's more time in between. The way this kickoff is completely different. And the way the returners work now, obviously shifty guys still have a big advantage. But the way it works is so different than any kickoff you've ever seen if you haven't watched the XFL.
Shifty guys getting the advantage, Donkey. That's what we're looking for. And we need a guy for that spot, frankly. I'm not upset with the price that we got him for. Right?
No, I am.
It is going to be a more integral role, and you're going to see more specialized guys put on teams exactly for that role. And I think the Steelers are a little bit ahead of the curve there. You know, Cordell Patterson might not be
what do you want
ultimately the guy who's going to set records with this new kickoff or whatever, but I do like that the Steelers are thinking ahead of the curve and acquiring somebody for that role.
This is the reason I don't like the move, Gingy, and it's the other point I wanted to bring up. Okay, so the Steelers' best quarterback last year, in your opinion, was?
Mason Rudolph.
He signed for Tennessee for how much money?
Oh, like $7 million.
$3 million. Just over $3 million. Okay. The Steelers were not willing to get close to what Mason Rudolph asked for, is what we were told. Meaning they weren't willing to get close to $3 million, Gingy. So we let our best quarterback last year walk for the price we're willing to pay for a player who, if he's successful in his role, will have 1 or 2 splash plays over the whole season. Seriously? That's what we've come to here in Pittsburgh?
Well, that guy I don't think really fits into our system anymore, Donkey. What? You're going to start him over Russell Wilson? Mason Rudolph
Russell
over
Wilson
Russell
wasn't
Wilson.
a Steeler. Hold on. Russell Wilson wasn't a Steeler at the time of discussion of contract with Mason Rudolph. Remember that. When we were discussing a contract extension with Mason Rudolph, it was before free agency started. It was before tampering started. That means we weren't willing to keep, as you just said, the best quarterback on our roster for $3 million. It really, to me, shows where the Steelers' problem is with their inability to pay even marginal money to acquire offensive talent. And I think the Steelers are falling behind every NFL team because of their inability to pay for offensive talent. They just don't do it, and it puts us farther and farther behind the eight ball because guess what they just outlawed, Gingy? Another form of tackling, making defense even less effective and less able to do their jobs. Of course, I'm talking about banning the hip tackle or the hip drop tackle, which, by the way, just put flags on all these little sissies because that's what we've come to at this point. The Steelers are trying to build a defensive juggernaut in an era that doesn't allow defense. I hate it. This signing shows me it. They're willing to pay $3 million for special teamers. They showed it before when they brought back Miles Killebrew. And I don't argue special teamers should get $3 million, but you're talking the best looking quarterback on the Steelers roster last year is Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph last year was more efficient than Russell Wilson. Mason Rudolph put up better numbers per play than Russell Wilson. And we weren't willing to pay him $4 million a year. But we're willing to pay his special teamers $4 million a year. The problem with the Pittsburgh Steelers is the Pittsburgh Steelers hate offense.
Yeah, I'm not ultimately willing to speculate that Mason Rudolph is going to end up better quarterback than Russell Wilson. If you're willing to go that route at this point, that's fine, but I'm not willing to put that on tape, donkey.
I'm not saying he was going to be better, but I'm saying you're going to be willing to pay Cordero Patterson $3 million a year, but you wouldn't offer it to your best quarterback who was coming off a 4-game stretch where he was better than any of the quarterbacks on your current roster last year.
Donkey, that's all hypothetical. You don't need
that's literal just statistics. From last season, Mason
literal
Rudolph
hypothesis, donkey. I understand you're saying like, oh, when we were discussing these trades, Mason Rudolph wasn't, was the best quarterback on the roster. Like, it's all moot. That's all moot, donkey.
No, it's not moot. How is that moot?
Because when you're projecting that way, you can't project backwards but not project forwards. I don't think Cordell Patterson was on the radar at that point. I think free agency is a fast-moving machine that deals get done based on availability, right? I don't think we were targeting Cordell Patterson when we were talking contract with Mason Rudolph. So all of that is a bit speculative when it comes down to breaking down numbers and money.
I hear you. But before Mason Rudolph walked, we did promise Patrick Queen the 5th richest contract to be a middle linebacker when the dude ranks out about 22nd in terms of starting middle linebackers. As a matter of fact, the best starting middle linebacker, Faye Odokun, down in Jacksonville, just signed a contract that pays him less per year than we're paying Patrick Queen. So this is an apples to apples comparison there. So the Steelers are willing to overpay for defensive talent, but not pay marginal rate for offensive talent?
I'm much more willing to engage in a discussion about overpaying Patrick Queen than I am about mincing $3 million a year over Cordell Patterson.
So the Steelers are willing to overpay defensive talent but not pay marginal rate for offensive talent, which is still kind of what I've been saying the whole time, that the Steelers avoid paying offensive players. As a matter of fact, everyone said Deontay Johnson got traded because he wanted out. Deontay Johnson never asked for a trade. The problem was the Steelers aren't willing to pay a wide receiver $15 million a year, so you knew he was going to hit the absolute Jets out of here because the Steelers build a team like it's 1979. They've built teams like it's 1979 since 1979, and it hasn't been effective in over a decade.
Trying to build around defense, donkey. Yeah, I don't know if that's the way anymore either, but that's what it looks like's happening. Yeah, Patrick Queen, I don't know about. I really like the signing, but overall, overpriced. Yeah, I don't know if that you're going to get the value and the production out of that spot. Right?
Well, the bigger problem for me here, Gingy, is we're already paying two middle linebackers like they're starting middle linebackers, and Cole Holcomb and oh my gosh, I can't think of the guy who actually was healthy last year.
Landon Roberts.
Landon Roberts, yes, thank you. We're already paying two middle linebackers like they're starting middle linebackers. Now we're paying two middle linebackers like they're starting middle linebackers and paying another one elite money, which means we're going to have starter money on the bench. And we haven't invested a dollar into this offense. We still have a big hole at left tackle, arguably a hole at right guard, definitely a hole at center, definitely a hole at wide receiver too, and potentially a hole at tight end because I know everyone loves Pat Freiermuth, but the dude has not put up above average receiving numbers. He's been worse than Mike Gesicki every year. And the dude's one of the worst run blocking tight ends in football when you look at his, EFP or EPA values, whatever the hell the new age era stat that ESPN likes to use, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and this is in a league, Gingy, where defense is getting harder to play every week. I mean, hip drop tackles getting taken away. How the hell's a defender supposed to tackle someone from behind?
They're gonna be jumping over them,
falling down and grabbing an ankle.
Yeah, they're gonna jump over top of them, and like Rey Mysterio Jr. like their legs up into like a pin move.
619 off a teammate.
Yes. That's how it's gonna have to look, Donkey. Yeah.
I love it. I would love to see that. And Gingy, this is the other problem I have so far with the offseason. What has been the Steelers' two biggest problems the last 12 years? Let's just say 12 years. Actually, no, I want to go back to 2010, so 13 years. I'm off a year here. What has been their biggest problem the last 13 years?
Covering the seams.
Yeah, tight ends and running backs specifically, right?
Yeah.
What move have the Steelers made while investing heavily in the highest paid defense in the league? What move have the Steelers made this offseason that improves their coverage ability against tight ends or running backs?
Yeah, nothing.
That's what I'm saying.
To be seen there.
We're out here spending all this money, but we're not spending the money to adjust our team to what modern football is. We're not becoming a bigger offensive threat. We're not becoming a team that's going to be able to shut down opposing tight ends. And when you look at the great teams in this AFC, Gingy, you're talking Baltimore, Mark Andrews. You're talking Buffalo, Dalton. Is it Dalton Kincaid? Dalton Kincaid. You're talking Kansas City, Kelsey. If you want to put the next teams up there, Miami's probably the only one that doesn't have a big time tight end because I believe Johnny Smith went to Houston, right? Is that where he ended up? I think, but either way, I think Houston has a tight end, and Cleveland has David Njoku. You're talking all these teams have tight ends, and the Steelers' addition was a downhill linebacker who has coverage numbers like Vince Williams. I'm just afraid while we are being aggressive this offseason, and man, is it fun to be out there getting talent. I know sometimes you have to overpay talent to get talent. It's fun to see the Steelers doing this. It just seems the Steelers are forgetting how football's played. We ignored the offensive trench completely. The defensive trench is getting old, although we did bring in a guy who I actually like, and I'll get to in a minute. But our linebacker we bring in is a guy who struggles in coverage, and I just don't see where this team is going. And if we are going somewhere, I have a hard time feeling it's the right direction right now.
Yeah, I'm going to have to see how that guy ultimately ends up contributing in the middle, Donkey. I don't know what are Patrick Queen's? He has reasonable pass rush for like a weak side linebacker in his position.
Mm-hmm.
Eight sacks from that position, I think, in 2 years, which is very formidable.
Very, very Vince Williams.
If you continue to, and again, what are they thinking, Donkey? The defense that bends but doesn't break, that gets the pass rush, that makes the quarterback have the miss, throw the ball up, get the splash play. That's really the formula that they're trying to work on there, I think.
And the Steelers, again, right now, we have two quarterbacks with a bunch of starting experience. So we bring in a guy who I think he would have made a good backup. But the thing is, when you have two established NFL starters, I think that third string quarterback, and maybe it still will be, but I'm afraid now this takes quarterback out of the draft, is a guy I would like to see, a developmental guy with a big arm. You're talking Spencer Rattler out of South Carolina. You're talking Milton out of Tennessee, which, by the way, if you want to watch a dude just zing the ball, go look up Joe Milton's pro day tape from Tennessee, Gingy. That dude can spin a football. That dude's athletic. I wouldn't mind wasting a fourth, fifth round pick on him. But bringing in Kyle Allen, a guy who has a lot of starts in his career, was a starter for a little while in Carolina. Then I believe he signed a contract in Washington. He ended up last year being the backup in Buffalo. A guy with a lot of mileage on it. And this is what I hate about the Steelers. The Steelers' depth chart almost always seems to get filled out, like the last positions, with veterans who have been there because that's what makes Mike Tomlin feel confident. And that's why I think the Steelers run into such problems when injuries hit, because we don't have a talented guy to fill in who maybe exceeds expectations before people get tape on him. Instead, we got some veteran dude who's going to give you meh. It's like Mike Tomlin fills his roster out at the end with meh instead of potential. And I think it's showing itself again. I think that's been one of the biggest problems in Steelers roster construction. And that's why I think you see the Steelers having so many holes every year, because there's not young players they're developing on the roster for the most part.
Yeah, that's quite possible, Donkey. We do play similar schemes from year to year, try to improve on them and put guys who are better at that particular scheme into that role. And eventually you start questioning whether the scheme overall works, offense and defense. We have debated
eventually
3-4.
Was 5 years ago.
We have debated 3-4 in the offseason. I think particularly probably last year and the year before, Donkey. We've debated whether 3-4 is optimal for the Steelers and Steelers just philosophy anymore. Are we back to that discussion again?
Mm-hmm. The biggest problem with the 3-4 is you have to have that nose who is an absolute stud in the run game. And the Steelers have not had a nose who's a stud in the run game for a long time. When they had both Hayward and Tuitt, it worked out okay because both of their ends were absolute studs. Both of their ends were probably top 10 defensive ends in the league just playing in the 3-4 scheme. It's just so hard to do the 3-4 scheme now. When we did it in the early 2000s, we were one of two teams who ran it. So, we got all the players who fit the scheme and we got to cherry pick the best ones. Now there's 4, 5, 6 teams. And when you're spreading that talent thinner, it gets hard to find that elite talent. And I think the biggest problem for the Steelers for a long time has been they don't have someone who's just an absolute stud stopping the run. Our biggest hope, I guess, of course, is the development of my favorite draft pick from last year, Keanu Benton, into that guy. But I'm not sure he's big enough to do that role, because if you look, he's about 20 pounds lighter than Justin Matabuke out there in Baltimore, which is why Baltimore's so good at it, is Matabuke is probably the best run-stopping nose that you've seen in a long time. And remember, when I said Tuitt and Hayward, don't forget, superstar just playing in the wrong system, Javon Hargrave was on those teams too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he ate up the run game, Donkey.
Yeah, he wasn't your typical two-gapper, but he was a hell of a one-gapper.
Heck yeah. Donkey, I don't disagree with you. Need to find somebody to cover these. You mentioned Freiermuth earlier, Donkey. I do agree with you on that. Freiermuth, unfortunately, is not gonna work in this system, and
he has to become an elite pass catcher. That's what it has to be, right?
Not the development's not there. What is he at, year 4?
Year 4, and we haven't seen him develop even to an above average pass catcher. He's an average pass catching tight end, and it's just not good enough.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree. Really ought to consider moving on.
When you look at the division and tight ends, he is literally the worst tight end in our division. Andrews is definitely above him, and Njoku is definitely above him. And last year, Cincinnati had Hayden Hurst, who's definitely above him. I mean, all those guys are better at catching the football, and all those guys are better at blocking the football. I know everybody ripped on Kenny Pickett because he was a Pitt guy, and that's the only reason he was stayed on the team. Pat Fryermuth's the same thing. It's just there's a lot more Penn State fans in the state of Pennsylvania than Pitt fans. Let's be honest. So he doesn't get the criticism he should because the dude is a terrible run blocker, and the dude's average at catching. Maybe this new system lets him explode, but remember, this is a system, Gingy, that made Kyle Pitts, who's an absolute freak of an athlete at tight end, have his worst years. So don't call me optimistic about this. What I expect to see, though, is some damn good production out of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren.
That is going to be the moneymaker right there, Donkey. Whether or not you have a team that can run block effectively to be able
Which
to
means you have to take out
the pass off of it.
And Dan Moore
Jr. Exactly.
And find a center.
Yeah, well, there's lots of... I mean, we could definitely talk speculation about what the Steelers do at this point for draft picks.
You got to find a wide receiver unless you're sold on one of or two of the set of Quez Watkins, I'll put Mims in there because he had a little bit of success in his career. I'll put Callaway in there because he had a little bit of success down in New Orleans a couple years ago. We could throw Van Jefferson in there. Hell, do you like little tiny Calvin Austin III trying to block in this run-heavy scheme?
Yeah, that's gonna be not a good show there.
And then my understanding is the Steelers' most interested receiver that they like is Xavier Worthy. All 5'10", 100 pounds of Xavier Worthy out in Texas, and I'm here like, y'all know you're running a run-heavy scheme, right? That when it worked in Tennessee, the wide receivers were A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. I mean, both of those dudes are 6'3", 220 plus, and we're out here running a bunch of receivers who, when soaking wet, maybe weigh 190 pounds.
Yeah. Seriously, they're going to have to body somebody.
I'm a little concerned that the Steelers on offense have forgotten what kind of system they're trying to run because they've ignored the offensive line. They've added all these little tiny, can't be caught wide receivers who haven't had much success but are more shifty than anything. And I'm like, you do know you're a run-heavy team. That's what Mike Tomlin likes. You do know you brought in Arthur Smith, who runs the ball more than anybody else. And you're signing wide receivers like we're the goddamn West Coast San Francisco 49ers. I think they're a little confused on roster construction here, but at least we spent more money on the defense, which I want to get into, Gingy. Finally, a depth signing I absolutely love. Dean Lowry, defensive lineman, more of a 4-3 defensive end than a 3-4, but he's played 3-4 in Green Bay, was a starter there for a while, has put up mediocre numbers, is graded out as about an average end his whole career, but as an average end, he grades out better than Larry Ogunjobi. So I love this signing because it's a guy who maybe this pushes Ogunjobi off the roster and leads to another potential upgrade on the defensive line, or at worst is a depth signing that makes up for the loss of Armand Watts. Amir Watts, excuse me.
Key position for which we need depth badly. I mean, I know we have so many other areas of need. Yeah, well, I mean, creates depth. Yeah, like you said, doesn't blow the top off in terms of production, but like
average starter, depth. Good.
Yeah, average starter, good. Right?
Because right now, if anyone got hurt, we're looking at Loudermilk and DeMarvin Leal. You want to talk about two big swings and misses in the draft? Look at those two.
Big swings and misses. What did we get? What did we use for Loudermilk?
Sure,
a fourth?
A third round on Leal. And that dude.
Okay, that's a miss. A fourth? At that point,
Loudermilk was like a sixth-rounder. So
okay,
not a big swing and miss.
But those ones to me are experimental.
Gingy, hold on.
Like
Isaiah Loudermilk's one career sack was Baker Mayfield running out of bounds behind the line of scrimmage. Okay, I still can't get over that.
Let's go. One.
He was literally 10 yards away from Baker Mayfield when it happened, but was the closest Steeler.
One is better than none. I do believe I remember that play as well, Donkey, yes.
Oh, we brought it up because I was trying to figure out when the hell he got a sack.
Yeah.
I was like, he's never tackled a quarterback. What is this shenanigans?
Uh-huh. Nice.
Gingy, that's my nonsensical stuff for this week. Although I have one other thing I want to talk about. But I want to get, do you have any nonsense going on? Anything cool you think's happening? Any rule changes the NFL passed, like maybe extending the trade deadline 1 week, that you really want to talk about?
Hip drop tackle and the kickoff were really the main changes this week. Love all the jockeying at the top with all these different guys at the top of the draft. Everybody can't trust anybody, Donkey. Can't trust anything you hear right now.
You're saying Caleb Williams is still in play for Pittsburgh?
I am not. I'm not. I'm saying Caleb will. It's all the guys. So
Jaden Daniels
right?
is where my hope has to lie. Jaden Daniels, can my hope lie there?
I saw
straight up to number 3.
I saw a headline this week that compared Drake May to Andrew Luck. Donkey.
Dude, I know pot's legal now in most states, but man, that's like some fentanyl-laced pot right there to make you think that stuff. That's the shit that's going to kill you making those predictions.
Well, I didn't make. I'm just saying those are the type of headlines that are out there. It's getting craziness, Donkey.
Yeah, headlines. Gingy, that's actually the last thing I want to talk about is sports writer headlines. So this week alone on Steelers insider websites, right? I've seen stories about how Kenny Pickett quit on the team, quit on the job, and that they never said they were guaranteeing anything to Russell Wilson. While another Steelers insider says the only reason Russell Wilson came here instead of New York Giants was the guarantees that he was made. And then another insider who comes in and says, well, once this became available, they made it clear that they didn't want Kenny to do this. It's 3 insiders giving you 3 potentially completely different stories. Am I supposed to believe anything that comes out of any quote-unquote insider's mouth at this point? Because it feels like they all just go to the bathroom, are taking a poop, and go, what will give me a good headline? It's not like they talk to anybody. They just think in their mind what will be a good headline, and then write the story, and then the dumb, what do we want to call this? Gen Z cancel culture we live in just sucks it up like it's factoid knowledge. Like, should I take anything any writer says with any type of truth at this point?
This time of year, Donkey, I don't think I would. It's all insanity.
At this point, I want the Steelers to acquire Caleb Williams. And we are really close, by the way, to getting all the quarterbacks I said we could get in the offseason, jokingly. We might as well add Ryan Tannehill. Who else? Kirk Cousins, man. Not. Ugh. So this story came out, and this one might be the one that made me the most mad. The Steelers don't even try to inquire about how much it costs to get Kirk Cousins. And I think that upsets me because, let's be honest here, Kirk Cousins would probably fit really well in Arthur Smith's system because it's very similar to the system Kirk Cousins ran when he was successful in Minnesota and won his one and only career playoff game.
Well, that would fall right in line with your theory of not paying offense, Donkey.
Yeah. Russell Wilson, we got him because he cost $0.
It sure did look like it.
And then all the premier offensive tackles are gone by this point because the Steelers aren't willing to pay a dime. Last year we lost out on probably the best offensive lineman in there because he was too expensive for us, and that, of course, is the tackle that Baltimore trained into Kansas City. Kansas City let go, and he signed with Cincinnati last year. I don't know why I can't think of his name. But it just, I don't know, Gingy. I really feel like this team is advert to change. I feel this team is set up to be potentially a losing season. This is probably the most worried I've been about a Steelers team in a long time. And it's purely because I feel like the Steelers are that person at the blackjack table who realized they don't know how to count cards, but they keep betting because they want to prove that no, my system works.
Well, Donkey, if I were you, I would be rejoicing when you talk about a losing season. Honestly, that's the thing that's going to spark the change, right?
I hear you, but a losing season when you're not rebuilding is shite because it makes the rebuild even longer because you've invested so much money. And I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I would much rather
you're
see.
Looking at a team that hasn't invested money in the offense anyway. And yes, we're talking about invested money on defense, but we're talking about guys who are more on the way out than they are in.
Yeah, and that would be a fine thing if these guys didn't all have 3-4 years still on their deals. I mean, when we look at this team last year, and this is what I want to really get into, did this team do anything on defense when TJ Watt got hurt?
No.
Exactly. So we're relying on TJ Watt, who's only had, one fully healthy season in the last 5 years, to be fully healthy and not have Father Time slow him down at all in order for our defense to even be mediocre. Because you can say what you want. Minka was on the field. We still sucked without TJ. Cam Hayward was on the field. We still sucked without TJ. I just don't understand why we're paying all these guys all this money in an offensive-driven league when the only cog that matters is TJ Watt.
Yeah, you might as well just put TJ out there because if you look at the stats, it really revolves around his participation on defense for the Steelers the last 3-4 years.
Mm-hmm. It does. Gingy, let's end this with some fire-off notes of fringe free agents that the Steelers are alleged to potentially have interest in. And let's go ahead and start your thoughts with Bud Dupree.
Why? Well, that's a guy who we talked about significantly last year, who made a trip to Pittsburgh last year. I would say.
Did he? Oh, off season. Fair.
Off season, yeah.
I thought you'd been in a game, and I was like, "What the hell did we play Atlanta?"
Not on the roster. Came to visit though under similar circumstances, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that this year.
Marcus Golden, good year for us last year.
Again, more depth pieces, but Donkey, you keep naming me defensive guys.
Yeah, I'm specifically starting on defense, but fair point.
Okay.
Patrick Peterson.
No.
No love at all. Okay.
No.
Let's see. There were some other Justin Simmons.
Ooh. How would that piece fit in, Donkey?
I don't think he would.
Yeah, I didn't think so either.
Him and Minka are the same type of safety, so you'd be playing Minka out of position again, and Minka as a box safety is like a $2 million a year dude, not a $24 million a year dude.
Yeah, that didn't work for us last year.
To be fair, I don't think any safety is a $24 million a year dude. At most, you should be getting 12, but what do I know? I'm not creating the team.
Seriously, Donkey.
All right, then let me get into some offensive names because those are most of the defensive names that I was able to find that I heard interest in the Steelers. Let's get to the offensive side of the football, and let's go to where our biggest hole probably is wide receiver. Are the Steelers being cheap, not giving Tyler Boyd what he wants, and will it cost them the wide receiver it seems that they are most interested in?
I think it would, Donkey. What's the number he looking for there, you hear?
About $6 million a year, 3 years, so 3 for 18. But we'll give Cordell Patterson 2 for 6.
Yeah, I don't know. Too long.
I don't think so, because think about, he's a slot receiver, blocks good, he's 30 years old. I know he's not the biggest speed, but speed's not going to be the most important part of his game if he's to be successful in Arthur Smith's system. It's his blocking ability from the slot.
Well, I'll give you that, Donkey. I know that's the one we wanted. And if it's only going to cost you $6 million a year for a real contributing piece, I think when we're talking about compensation to production, that's one that you'd get your money's worth on.
Yeah, I agree. Let's keep going down the wide receivers that I've heard, and then other ones I think would fit. I've heard talk Michael Gallup, potentially, cut by Dallas, had a few good years, coming off a few injury years where his production has not lived up to hype. Thoughts on Michael Gallup coming to Pittsburgh?
Not opposed. Going to need somebody at wide receiver. I have mild recollection of him
had 1,000-yard
being a
season in Dallas.
number three guy in Dallas.
He was a good number 2 his second year in Dallas. Had over 1,000 yards, played good second fiddle there. Let's run off Hunter Renfrow, former slot receiver for the Raiders.
Not as exciting.
Beckham Jr., another slot guy, didn't have the best year last year for Baltimore. Has really seemed to lose a step since those back-to-back knee injury seasons.
Yeah, in a year where we've talked about attitude much more on the Steelers than we have in previous years, that's a hard pass for me.
Steelers like to be a retirement home, so how about Julio Jones?
Well, that would fall in line with the MO, donkey.
Former Atlanta Falcon, old as dust.
If we could get him for $3 million a year, he'll probably be a Steeler next week.
Michael Thomas, a guy who at one point was the top receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, what happened to him, donkey?
Injuries. And last year he showed a little bit of spark, but you can see he lost a step. And he was a guy who wasn't fast to begin with. So losing a step when you're not fast to begin with is a killer.
Yeah, performed his best with Drew Brees. Of course, that helps.
Yeah. Guy coming off of a year-long suspension. We'll have to see what the Jets do, but a lot of thought says they release him. Has had success in Arthur Smith's system. That's Corey Davis.
Ooh.
That's, of course, if the Jets release him, which is what the rumor is.
I don't know, donkey. I kind of like that one.
Yeah, there's a fun one there. Some other interesting names out there. I don't know if you remember him, but he had a good year. Really a lot of drops, but had a great year in Jacksonville 3 years ago. Not so much since leaving there. He went to Detroit and then somewhere else. That's DJ Chark.
I don't remember that name, donkey.
He's a guy who's had a 1,000-yard season down there in Jacksonville. Got paid a lot when he went to Detroit. Didn't do good there, and I think they traded or cut him. He ended up somewhere else. Some other names on the list of guys who maybe fit out there. Equamia St. Brown. He's I believe he's a brother to Amaron St. Brown in Detroit, but never really lived up to his draft profile. Chase Claypool, of course, is still out there. LaVisca Chenault's out there, fast as hell. Jakeem Grant, kind of a bigger-bodied wide receiver. Deontay Hardy, former first or early second-round pick who's just never lived up to anything anywhere he's gone. And, of course, you know I love this dude when he's in Tampa because all this little white guy did was score touchdowns for Tom Brady. Scotty Miller. And he's the guy that Atlanta had. Any of those names push the envelope for you. I already said I would love to see Claypool back, but it wouldn't happen just because his body, at least, and willingness to block, to me, fits in well. I don't think it'll happen, but...
Yeah, not fitting into the system. I don't know. We could use a guy, though, who could run across the middle and catch donkey.
Yeah, we certainly could, or a guy who could block it all. A lot of the names that I really wanted have already signed anywhere. Of course, the guy I really wanted to sign because he just has the best name out there and the perfect body type for our system was Little Jordan Humphrey. He went to Denver. Just signed recently. I really would have liked that one. So perhaps we go and maybe we talk about some offensive linemen out there. Donovan Smith, he's a guy who started every year in Tampa, started last year for Kansas City. He has a lot of experience, a lot of winning experience, but a lot of penalties. He's probably the best available tackle. Is he a guy you think the Steelers should entertain?
I don't know, donkey. Depends on what we got cooked up in the draft. You think the Steelers are going to stay at 20, or do you think they're going to move?
I have no idea, but they have a lot of holes I'd like to see some starting getting filled. Maybe some guys who had, or older guys who maybe you hope still have a little bit. David Bakhtiari, coming off a couple injury seasons in Green Bay. If anything, I'm sure he's going to go end up with his bro man in New York if he signs anywhere to play. And Chris Hubbard, a former Steeler, played a lot of years in Arizona. A couple guys who at least if you bring them in, even if they're not what they once were, are at least competition.
Take a look at Hubbard.
And then a couple guys who are bigger guys have struggled in the NFL, but have normally graded out as good run blockers. DJ Humphries and Mekhi Benton, both young enough and still talented enough to play and grade out at least as good as Dan Moore Jr., but are better run blockers.
Yeah, we're going to need somebody specifically in that role, Donkey, for the run block, that is.
And, of course, a guy who's been a free agent 3 times now, and I always say the Steelers should get him because he's a good veteran presence. Riley Reiff is a free agent again, but this is the time I wouldn't actually sign him because he's a little too old for me.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't need any more age in that depth, Donkey.
Do you think any of the guards are worth talking about, bringing in maybe to move Daniels into center? There are a few out there still who could play. You're talking Laken Tomlinson, Mike Lewinsky, for all you Penn State fans out there. Justin Pugh, Trey Turner. The Steelers have had experience there before, very average. Or perhaps a Steelers swing guy we could bring back into the fold to be a good depth piece. Matt Filer just finished his contract with the Chargers. Potential reunion guy there.
Be all right with Filer.
And then
how did he do in L.A.?
So you know how he was average, but being average was really good for the Steelers then?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was slightly below average in the Charger system, but I'm going to be honest with you. He was, again, the best offensive lineman in that line, but that Chargers line was... Yeah.
Yeah, I'd take a look at him coming back to our system.
So then we can get to centers here. Connor Williams is obviously the name people want to talk about, but coming off a major knee injury in December and really was just average at Miami. I don't know about that. Arguably right now the best healthy name on the list is Mason Cole. Is a reunion likely here?
I don't think so.
You look at the rest of the list, then you have Brian Allen out there, Connor McGovern, Scott Quisenberry, who had like one good year in Denver over like 8 years of playing. Maybe a guy like Nick Gates, if you want to play on a guy who maybe can be a fringe starter. Yeah, the names are just... Oi!
Yeah, pretty thin, Donkey.
Yeah. Any of the center names move you? Do you think that maybe even if they don't move you, maybe bringing back Mason Cole at a slightly less cap hit is the move right now? Because Mason Cole can't be worse than Mason Cole.
I think the move's probably going to be moving up in the draft and taking a starter quality center there.
Right, but right now the only guy who's said to go in the first round is Jackson Powers, and I'm going to be honest with you. Every year I've told you the Steelers should draft a center because I'm absolutely sold, and those guys end up becoming really good, right? I was all in on Creed Humphrey, and I was all in on Landon Dickerson, right?
Uh-huh.
I don't see that guy. I don't see that level of talent in this draft. I know Jackson Powers has a lot of big potential, but dude, I watched enough Oregon games, man. Their offensive line got blown up. I don't know if center's the way to go in this year's draft. I think the Steelers are going to really kick themselves for not getting Mitch Morse when he came in, for being cheap, for lowballing Mitch Morse and letting him go to Jacksonville. Remember, Mitch Morse's first stop was Pittsburgh. That tells you where he wanted to be. I think the Steelers are going to kick themselves for that.
Yeah, probably. We definitely need a center now.
Mm-hmm.
Should have got one when they were available.
We're at a point where I personally don't think there's a slam dunk in the draft. I know a lot of people love Jackson Powers, and a lot of people love Frazier out of West Virginia and Pittsburgh land. But, dude, that's the same as every love for every freaking prospect that comes out of Pitt, Penn State, or West Virginia. You're going to always see the love there and probably the overhype. Honestly, if I was going to draft a center, it would be, is it Georgia? Georgia or Alabama center, I can't remember which red team it is. That dude seems to have a lot of upside, but he's not a day one starter, and that's the problem. I don't know if they're, even with Jackson Powers. I don't know if there's a day one starter that's above average in this draft class. I think Jackson Powers comes in, and I think he's an average starter at day one with ability to really step up as he progresses, But I think he needs that experience, much like Broderick Jones did, right? If you're going to start him day one, you're going to get average play with a lot of, you see the potential, but it needs to be refined and it needs to really get into a hole. I don't see a Marquise Pouncey, a Creed Humphrey, a Landon Dickerson in this draft, and that's what scares me.
Yeah, because we need one now.
Mm-hmm. You go all in.
Too long in free agency to really capitalize.
Gingy, we're going to end with a nonsensical take on Steelers offseason to this point. What do you grade it, and why do you give it that grade?
Ooh, boy. Steelers offseason to this point is a C. We're treading water.
I'm shocked.
We didn't sink the ship, but boy, we didn't necessarily do anything to improve its buoyancy.
I'm just in shock that you didn't fanboy here, so I'm lost. But go ahead, explain what you mean by we're still as buoyant as we were. You think all the moves are just essentially lateral moves?
Pretty much. Well, and not even that yet until we see the draft, till we see the final result. But we might have upgraded our quarterback room a little bit. We might end up losing some talent on the wide receiver end. We probably went lateral on defense between the signing at safety and middle linebacker versus the losses. You see what I'm saying? We're treading water. The team's not sunk. It looks like another, barely above 500 first-round playoff football team right now. It treaded water, donkey. That's where it would sit.
Yeah, we're almost really similar because I actually give it a B+, and it's because I think roster-wise, I think this team is less talented than last year's team on a few specific areas. But I think the upgrades, specifically in special teams, with the new punter, is the offset here. Defensively, Patrick Queen comes in. He's just a full season of Cole Holcomb. Given the extra depth is always good. So I call that plus. I think Dante Jackson is a downgrade from Patrick Peterson, but then that's evened out by Elliott being the type of box safety that can let Minka be Minka. So I call the defense a pure wash. Punting, Johnston's a huge upgrade. So punting, special teams, huge upgrade. That's even before Cordell Patterson. Offense, it has to be a negative. I mean, you replace Deontay Johnson with a bunch of guys who've had a mediocre one season at this point. You look at offensive line, you didn't replace that you lost Chuck Scorefor, who was a better starting tackle when he started than Dan Moore Jr. So you didn't replace that. That's a big problem because you don't have a depth guy like Broderick Jones to step in right now. You currently don't have a center because you let Mason Cole go. I just can't give the offense an upgrade. Although I will say this. If Justin Fields gets an equal chance, I think the quarterback room has upgraded potentially because I think Justin Fields is the most talented of the 6 quarterbacks the Steelers have had on the roster the last 2 seasons. If it's going to be Russell Wilson, I think the quarterback room's a push because I'm not sure that you look at the numbers Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph put up after the firing of Matt Canada, and I just don't see Russ Wilson as an upgrade from those numbers.
Yeah, that's not even something we've really talked about yet, Donkey. The guy who's set impossible, who almost set rookie records for overall rushing yards for a quarterback and that. Be getting added on to a Artie Smith offense. Yes, Najee Harris might not be Derrick Henry, but Justin Fields is certainly not Ryan Tannehill in that aspect either. So there are things to be spoken about there.
If you're saying Ryan Tannehill had more success in his first stint than Justin Fields did in his first stint, I agree with you.
What I'm saying is that Justin Fields has better wheels than Ryan Tannehill.
Right, and the counteraction to that would be Ryan Tannehill is 1,000 times more accurate of a passer than Justin Fields.
Yes, he is. But again, if we're going the trying to poor man Baltimore Raven offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Justin Fields fits that bill. Yes.
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 I've told you this from the get-go. I love the Justin Fields trades because it is the only potential needle mover the Steelers have on offense. Maybe George Pickens and maybe Jaylen Warren, because if Jaylen Warren turns into Austin Eckler, huge. Najee is who he is. Najee's not a needle mover. Jaylen Warren, George Pickens, and Justin Fields. 2 of the 3 of them need to take that step into superstardom, and the Steelers have a chance to have a really good offense.
Woot woot. That's what I like to hear, Donkey. That's what I like to hear out of you there.
That's what I want to end my stuff on, is my positive take of there are potential needle movers. They just need to move, And Justin Fields, by the way, and I've said it before, I don't know which way the needle is going to move, but goddamn would I love to see him instead of Russell Wilson. Gingy, any closing thoughts from you?
Nope, I think we've about covered it there, Donkey.
Gingy, any shout-outs to you?
From you, massively nonsensical. Nothing to me. Anything to you?
I do. I have a shout out to everybody who made the Pittsburgh Pirates opening day roster. Love to see it. Love to see them taking a top prospect, a young guy, something the Pirates don't normally do. But Jerry Jones, the pitching prospect, number 3 prospect in the system, actually going, it's not even north with the team because they started the season in Miami. Bradenton to Miami, does anyone know if that's north? Because if so, they did go north with the team. Otherwise, they just kind of stayed level. But that's what I have to say. And now it's time. I'll let you know I'm the Viking Donkey. That's Viking_Donkey on Twitch and Twitter. Your daily dose of donkey with Ginger is a YouTube channel where you get all this fun, nonsensical nonsense. And I know these episodes have been going long for my off-season stuff, but man, you get to just talk crazy with Gingy. You can't help yourself but spend an hour. And I know everybody loves to hear it. So, Gingy, send them out.
Mutant Gingy in the house. It's certainly nonsensical. And listen, when the Steelers got a QB room like Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, there's an hour worth of nonsense to talk about. Wave them if you got them.